Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Let's start. My name is Alan, and I'm a senior change management consultant and a professional development director at ACMP Ontario. Welcome to the joint session of ACMP Ontario and ICF Toronto. Today we have a wonderful presentation that is the outcome of an important and meaningful partnership, fully aligned with one of the requests that ACMP Ontario leadership received from the provincial members, which was offering webinars based on partnership with other professional bodies. We have designed this joint event with ACMP, with ICF of Toronto, our wonderful partner. And this event is designed for both change management and coaching professionals. It's good that yesterday we heard that the registration number reached our defined goal. So we are so happy about running this. Okay. We have a wonderful team of speakers today, guys. Alicia, who is a member of the ACMP Global and ICF Taskforce, is the first one who has also been my key partner in designing this event, this professional development event, and will kindly help me in facilitating the event as well. Lisa, another member of the task force, ACMP and ICF task force, and Rachel are the other super competent and experienced experts who will speak today. As it's easily noticeable on this slide, all the three speakers are brilliant and certified professionals in their fields, who are also active in their own consulting and coaching businesses, of course. It's fantastic to have them with us today. And thanks so much, Jeff, Caitlin, Koya, and all other ACMP Ontario and ICF Toronto team members for your support. During this presentation, first, the findings from the joint global task force of ICF and ACMP Global focused on application of change management in coaching, as well as the application of coaching in change management, will be shared. Then Lisa and Rachel will speak, and real experiences and lessons learned in leveraging coaching in change management, and change management in coaching will be reviewed by these two wonderful individuals. And finally, you will be randomly assigned to a short breakout session to chat with your colleagues or other professionals. And also, we will have a few poll questions during the presentation. Alicia, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you, Alan. I wondered, Jeff, you launched that poll. I wondered if people have filled out the poll, if we have any results. Just curious who we have with us today. Do we have results from the poll? 54% of the people have joined us are coaches, 25% change management. We have 17% that are doing both, and 4% that are neither. So okay. Interesting, right? We've got a really good mix. That's exactly what we were hoping for today, because we really want to share, different perspectives and get both of us together, both coaches, change managements, and others that are interested in change, to come together and start talking about what are the opportunities for us to work better together. So I'm kicking us off here, and I'm going to quickly go through some highlights from how we got to here today. So it really started over 3 years ago, and the spark was this HCI ICF co-created research. And it was about really understanding organizations and what sets up organizations to have successful transformation. And the outcome of the report really was the spark for having this collaboration. So there was over 400 organizations that responded. We had IT, computer, HR. We had all different what am I trying to say? Functions within an organization responding. And what we saw through this report was that, 77% of the time organizations are in change. And over 85% of the time, the change has been unsuccessful. So that was before COVID. Can you only imagine? I can't even imagine right now. So that was a spark. So if you want to just flip the slide, Alan, one of the key outcomes of this research, and this was shared with ACMP. So this report really gleaned some really interesting research. And so this was shared with ACMP globally, because it was a really interesting finding and some great conversation to be had that said, organizations do a lot to help facilitate change through their organization. They use lots of tools, as you can see here. And what you see, again, remember this is pre-COVID, so classroom training and web-based training were the two biggest tools that they used, and then many others. The highlighted boxes are 4 areas where coaching was used as well as additional tools to build change capability in an organization. So what we found was, yes, coaching is being used within organizations to build change capability. And what we found out, if you want to flip the slide, Alan, was that actually coaching in all of its different forms and fashions was the most effective tool to build change capability. And so this was a bit of an aha. And so what happened next was the sort of the seed of this joint task force, which is ICF and ACMP Global, starting to talk to each other. So they shared the report in September and then in May. And then in September of 2019, both organizations globally sent out a survey to all of their chapters and said, hey, we think there might be something here about collaborating. What do you think? Do you want us to spend time and energy to do this? And they got an overwhelming, yes, please. Yes, this sounds cool. Let's make this happen. And so in December, they brought together a joint task force to start to really dig into what this collaboration could be. And that started in February. And that's when I was chosen as one of the members on the task force, because of the work that Toronto and ACMP at the time, Toronto, had already started doing together. So many of you, or some of you, may have been at that fall business symposium that we put on together. And so I like to say we were trailblazers. We were actually ahead of the game. We knew and saw the opportunities, so we came together. So because of that, I ended up being selected to be on the task force. So then we started to create work streams that said, hey, let's figure out how we can work better together. The work stream that I was in came up with, and you will see it, is 7 inflection points of where coaching might be able to be more embedded into the change management process. We did a lot of research, we'll talk to that. And then in June, we presented these findings at the ACMP Global Conference. And overwhelmingly, we heard, we're onto something here. And then we presented it to coaches at the ICF Global Conference in October, and we got the same results. So it was great to hear both of us were talking about, yeah, there's really something here. Let's figure this out, how to work better together. So that's how we got to where we are today. And I'm going to spend, you can flip the slide, Alan. I'm just going to spend a couple more minutes just grounding us on what is the work that's been done to date. So the first job was to say, okay, we see that there's a seed of an idea here that we could work better together. Let's start figuring out who does what and why. And so we really started with really grounding definitions. So again, Alan, if you'd like to flip the slide. So what we said was, change management as defined by ACMP, it's a practice of applying a structured approach to transitioning an organization from a current state to a future state. The agenda is typically organizationally led and determined, and it's usually a top-down. So then we looked at, well, okay, what happens with coaching? Well, again, the ICF definition of coaching is you're partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. The agenda is client-led, and it's often, well, it must be held in confidence. So if you want to click again, what we have in common is that we both are in the business of supporting successful change. But what you can see from this is that we go at it from quite a different perspective. So then we started to say, okay, so how will we work better together? So then we took it to the next level down and we said, okay, what are each of the roles that happen within the change process? So often there's a project manager, a change manager, a professional coach, and we call this a big C. And then often there's a use of coach-like skills throughout the process. So we started here and said, okay, what does each of these roles play in the change management process? And this was really important because if we're going to figure out how we work better together, it's really important to understand who's doing what and why. And so out of this work, what became clear to us was that the project manager is really responsible for the what. What is the scope? How do we schedule this? What is the cost? The change manager is the how. How do we achieve these outcomes that we've agreed to? Risk assessment, risk mitigation, a lot of that work. The professional coach is the person who helps to answer, who do we need to be in the change process to achieve these outcomes? And then the use of coaching skills, as I said, is used throughout to really encourage inquiry and uncover resistance and spark motivation. So this was an important piece. And what I want to say about this is we did a lot of research, and what we saw was sometimes people are wearing dual hats. So what we're not saying right now that, nobody ever coaches. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that often coaching might be absent, or sometimes the change manager is wearing two hats. Okay. So then having that clarity, we started to work on job number 2, which is how do we work better together? And so, as I said, through research and case studies, we identified 7 inflection points. We used the change management standard. Now, again, we recognize there are lots of different change management processes. And so because we were working with ACMP and ICF, we use what is the change management standard that ACMP sort of, indoctrines. So that's what we used. And we, as I said, we came up with, if you look at that process and you pull it all apart, where is it that there are opportunities to improve the outcome for the professionals that are working in it and the client? Because through all the case studies, what we heard was it would have worked better if, and often what we heard is it would have worked better if we got deeper early, if we understood the risks and mitigated risks earlier. Okay, so I know I'm going quickly, but it's just to give you a flavor because I want to make sure that Rachel and Lisa have time to talk about this. So again, here's the change management standard, the process. It's 5 big buckets, starts with evaluating, then to formulate, develop, execute, and complete. What we see is often coaches are brought in near the end when there's resistance, when perhaps the project gets slowed down, they need to speed it up. Sometimes coaches are brought in to very executional and very specific pieces of the transformation. But again, what we found through our research is there's an opportunity to bring coaching in earlier, much earlier in the process. So right from the beginning, when you start to develop the strategy and evaluate the impact. So in each of these, for the coaches, if you don't know this standard, within each of these buckets, there's about 10 or 15 steps. Okay, so if you can imagine, there's like 60 to 70 steps in this process. We took every single one of those processes and really defined who does what and where are the opportunities. And so this is how we came out with these 7 inflection points. And so it's not important today to go through each of them specifically, but this is what we tested and validated at the ICF and the ACMP conference. This is what was validated by over 300, both coaches and change managers, that when we use case studies and we actually took them through this, both said, wow, there is something here. So today I'm just planting a seed. I know it's very quick and it's top line, but I wanted you to get a real sense and flavor for the work that's going on globally. And we are now in year 3. So, and we have Magda, we have, and Greg, we have like the top CEOs of each organization as sponsors. So they are walking the talk, like they are actually involved and they really want to bring this to life. And so today, this is about bringing it to life locally for us here in Toronto and in Ontario, to meet one another and to talk about what we see as opportunities. And that's where Rachel and Lisa are going to take us. So if you want to just flip one more slide, Alan. This is the outcome. So if we can work better together, it benefits all of us, including the client. These are the 4 biggest challenges that we often see through research that impedes the change process and transformation. And so what we're suggesting here through the research is creating distinct roles with added expertise throughout the change process will help to mitigate these risks and improve the outcomes. So thank you so much for listening to me. I'm happy to now pass it over to Rachel to give us a live experience as a coach who works in change management. So Rachel, over to you.
Thanks so much, Alicia, and love the information, love reading the comments, because I think people are absolutely fascinated in some of the data that you shared. I also want to, we're all working from home. Apparently my dog has found something interesting, so I hope we don't get distracted by her. So I come to you today with a little bit of a case study from EY, and I'm wearing the hat as a professional coach. I'm wearing the hat as the network engagement lead for EY and part of the Canada Coach Network. And for those of you that don't know, EY is a global leader in assurance, consulting, strategy, and transaction with over 300,000 employees and supporting clients in over 150 countries around the world. So this is a case study of some work that we started doing this past summer, where we had the opportunity to work with an international houseware suppliers and their head office is in the USA. So let me just lay down the context and the landscape. So this company was formerly a privately run business and was in the midst of new ownership. And a new CEO had been brought in, and there's a lot of change going on. The executive team includes some new leaders to the organization that the CEO had brought in, and a lot of leaders that had worked for the company for many, many years. So the institutional knowledge ran really, really deep. If we look at the external landscape, and I'm sure you guys all are, this is very familiar from, it's a supply chain perspective, shipping challenges, rising costs, diminishing supplies, COVID, absenteeism. I mean, like it's a tough situation to be in. And what I want to emphasize are really the seismic shifts and the pressure and the changes this organization was and is currently undergoing. So this is what faced us and the executive team, I'll call them the ELT, the executive team that we're working with from a coaching perspective. Overarching was that we had all this amazing knowledge, we had a loyal team, the company had value, the people had value, and that further change was absolutely going to be more dramatic. So the new leaders had to learn the business to deliver change. The existing leaders had to adapt very quickly in a shifting environment. The new CEO had to look at the existing team and create engagement, retain talent, and really help everyone raise their game. They were under a completely different lens. So there were two main streams of work. One was really the teamwork. And this is where change management comes in. The team sessions where purpose and alignment and working together were the focus. And at that first team session, we saw the opportunity to bring in change experts. And when Lisa and I get into more of our panel discussion, I'll share more about the structure of EY and change management and coaching and how they complement and support each other. And from a coaching perspective, we actually had the unique opportunity to view our leaders in light of real life. We attended and we participated in team sessions. We observed behavior, we observed dynamics, and we had the pleasure of seeing some of the one-to-one work coming to life in the team. So it became really clear. There were themes that were coming up that the team was relying too heavily on the CEO to make decisions. The leaders were doing too much and not delegating enough. The legacy leaders were going under rapid change and evolving their contributions. The fact is the entire leadership change was undergoing all of this work simultaneously. So the changes of the organization, the changes internally, the changes within the team and the team dynamics. And themes such as trust and speaking with a single united voice, healthy conflict and psychological safety came up in the team sessions. And that was actually carried on in the teamwork. And so if you take a look at the team sessions, we started off really not knowing that we had to leverage our change people and our change leaders, and really understanding that the shift was so massive that we actually, earned the right to bring in more resources, to up our leaders' game, to up our game, and really to partner together and to allow both the what and the how and the who, like if I'm going to look at leverage what it is that Alicia just said. So we began the work in the summer, and really the landscape keeps shifting. We hear our leaders tell stories of movement and growth, experimentation, celebration, and more challenges. And the fact is we've just begun. We've collectively earned the right to continue to develop this team. So the start of the summer, we've had one contract extension, we'll probably have another one. And I say the collective we. We are being agile and we're being bespoke in our approach in working with the needs of each executive and their respective teams. As an organization, as EY, we have the connections and the tools and the resources to leverage our change experts and their expertise in all the coaching work that we do. So if I consider our theme for today and the term better together, there's absolutely no doubt that change management and coaching operate best when hand in hand to enable, support, guide successful and sustainable change. So that's just a little bit of an overview. And I want Lisa, now I'm going to turn over to Lisa to give her case study.
Thanks, Rachel. So, I know there's only some folks necessarily that may have seen, or had some background on what a change management engagement might look like. So that's a little bit of the focus of the context I want to share here is that, this was a spotlight on an organization that we'll call it 30, 40 years old. They, the ways of working were very well entrenched. It was a lot of hierarchy, a lot of silos. And, they had a desire to make a change in the way that they work. And this was pre-COVID. And so the desire to make, the way that they change was really something that was going to involve changing just about every aspect of an employee and leader's life in the work environment. And so to give you an idea of, some of those things that they were looking to shift. So they were, looking to shift away from, my having my own desk and having my name and my family photos on my desk, and that leaders would no longer have an office. And that, the type of space and what the space looked like around them was also going to be very different. And they would have the opportunity to explore different type of workspace to use, and they could move throughout these different work style spaces throughout the day. And, that shift was significant on the surface. And, you know, when you think about each of you and your work experience, you know, from where that organization was, from a culture perspective, from a leadership perspective, to where the leaders wanted to take them, you know, kind of as Rachel said, it was almost a Grand Canyon sized gap in between those two things. And so from a change management lens, this really required quite a significant effort to do two things. So to get to a point where that, you know, there's change adoption and the benefits as to why they started this thing in the first place are coming to life. But there was a lot of, when you think about those things that I mentioned that are outlined here, you know, underneath that, there's a lot of what both Alicia and Rachel have called out in terms of how we need employees and leaders to be during this change. And so, you know, one of the things that we did, just to highlight a couple of the parts of the approach, was, you know, partnering up front to bring the leadership team together to help understand, you know, to answer a couple of key questions. So, you know, what is changing? So yes, on the surface, there's those 4 bullet points up top. Agreed. But under the surface, anytime, you know, leaders or organizationally, we ask someone to change, that ultimately means they need to change their habits, behaviors, and thinking. And so, you know, their say, act, and do is what we're asking them to change. And that is something that is incredibly personal. And so bringing, you know, defining up front what needs to change, not just those 4 bullet points there, in terms of behaviors and habits, what needs to change in terms of perhaps new roles and responsibilities that this type of change would create. And so, you know, partnering to create this initial session also helped, you know, from a coaching and a change perspective, to get a sense of the leadership style, to get a sense of the culture, to understand, you know, where we have leadership alignment around some of these activities, where we don't, and to then be able to leverage those coaching skills from that leadership alignment perspective. Because as a change professional, leadership alignment is, you know, often something that we're challenged with and don't necessarily always have the skills to be able to bring those folks together in a way that we know they need to be to get to a point of adoption and outcomes. And so partnering there was important. And then, you know, Alicia talked about big C and little c. And I think the other one that I want to just call out is that we were very intentional about creating a change network. And this particular change network was, so there was probably 8,000 employees. And so the change network was 250 plus. And this change network represented employees that had raised their hand, that had self-identified to be a part of this network, that said, yes, I want to be a part of this change. I want to be someone that can help others, and I can be influenced within this process. And those folks that took on the role as a change champion in that change network, it meant that we were asking them to go out and have conversations with their peers or have conversations with their leader. And in often cases, helping the peers and their leaders through the struggles they were having or the resistance that they might be putting up. And so we made sure that there was, you know, an element of coaching skills that became part of how we developed that network, but also became part of how we ran that network ongoing, so that we weren't just doing kind of an upfront, you know, skill sharing with them, that we continued that development as long as the program ran, which was a couple of years. You know, and I think just to highlight one other point in terms of, you know, the being element to this. So when we look at one change in specific across the organization, this shift to no offices or to, you know, unassigned seating, you know, for a lot of folks, that felt like they were losing something. And so there was a very real grieving process. And so there were different motivations and things that drove the grieving process, but the grieving process was real and it was palpable in much of the early part of this transformation. And so being able to focus on how do you help, you know, various levels of the organization and various feelings actually be present, and not just think of this as something on your to-do list that you're going to get adoption. It's much broader than that. And taking a look at the being part of this is just so important. And I think, you know, Rachel and I are going to jump into kind of sharing a couple of questions back and forth, and then we invite you guys as well to share some questions. So if you've got anything kind of as Rachel and I start talking, feel free to jump in because you'll have a couple of minutes for those questions as well. Over to you, Ms. Rachel.
Rachel, you are on mute.
I'm on mute. You know, it's me and my dog. We're on mute. We're on mute together.
So
Lisa.
you're ready? Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I saw you on mute there. So, I know you shared a little bit, but I'd love to hear more about, as a coach, or a coach on a program like you spoke about, how do you engage the change management team? What does that look like together?
Yeah, so I want to use the lens of a large organization like EY, and it's actually it's in a state of flux and constant change, which is perfect for this. The organizational structure within EY is that there's the people advisory services, and underneath there's workforce advisory, and under workforce advisory comes OD, organizational design, L&D, change management. And only as of 2020, it's only this past, literally in the past 12 months, is coaching. And coaching is a new practice that one of the partners is standing up, an MCC certified coach herself, that she's standing up. So in this example, we saw an opportunity, or the leader saw an opportunity, to bring in change management. And through the network, I mean, in a large organization, it's who you know and how you know, and the reaching out and the fact that they're all together. In another example, which I haven't shared, the OD work came in, and then the change work came in, guiding the OD to support the OD work, and then coaching's been brought in. So it's really, in my mind, is it a chicken or an egg? I think it really depends on where the relationship begins, and us knowing as coach professionals, or as change agents and change professionals, that there's actually a place for both of us, and that we complement and support each other's body of work. And that's really the biggest thing. So my answer to you is it depends. And the fact that we're all working, or EY is all working under that one umbrella, allows for those touch points to happen. I don't know if that explained it well enough. So ask me if you need clarification on that.
No, I mean, I think part of your answer is that it depends is actually really what we are seeing and living this kind of day to day. So in my role, as I do wear the two hats from being a certified coach as well as a change practitioner, and it is a chicken and egg in some scenarios for sure.
Yeah, and we still haven't figured out which. And I don't know if it has to be. I mean, I think coaching is, well, never mind. I'm going to walk away from that for a minute. Let me just move on to another question to you, Lisa. As a change practitioner, what elements do you look for that suggest that a coach could be brought in?
So, I know Alicia summarized it into kind of 7 inflection points within the process, but there are a significant number of them. And, I'm going to just touch on a couple, but, I mentioned one around leadership alignment. And, that is a key point in terms of, oftentimes, and especially in a large transformation, you're talking about cross-functional leaders that have not worked together before, leaders that often have competing priorities in terms of what they want to do or need to do for the organization to be rewarded. And so they're also likely working together for the first time. So being able to bring that together and to be able to gain the insights in terms of culture, what's underlying here? What are the behaviors from a leadership perspective that we need to address? Is certainly one of those. I think another is, when we look at change, understanding how do we measure adoption? How do we measure the outcomes and measure our success? Yes, in some changes, there are some things that are easy to measure when it's, technology driven, or there's tactics there. But a lot of times you're looking at shifts in behavior. And so that's absolutely another area where, you'd like hand in hand, arm in arm from a coaching and change perspective. Absolutely. And I think, it cascades. And quickly, just to mention a couple others, is that oftentimes the leader who's leading change in an organization has very little experience leading change. And to be very honest, a lot of the time too, they may have been a leader that was a SME and was amazing at what they did and put into a leadership role, and the organization that necessarily invested them as a leader. And now they're asking them to lead change. And to me, that's another, it's another layer of skills on top of those leadership skills. And so oftentimes there's a need to work one-on-one with that sponsor from a coaching perspective is another one as well. Middle of the organization and the change network as a couple of others. So there, I could go on and I won't, but there's a lot of opportunity there.
We have a couple, thank you, Lisa. We have a couple of, a few questions actually in the chat box that I'd like to bring forward, if that's okay. Vicky asks, I think this is specific to Rachel. Rachel, what change tool have you used in your coaching, both individual and team? Is there a specific coaching tool?
Oh, great question. So first of all, one of the things that I'm a huge fan of that EY loves using is a 360 called Leadership Circle Profile. And that is a very robust 360 that drives deep awareness. And for a coach, we have to work first on that awareness piece and to really calibrate how I see myself versus how others see me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the information is, I call it coaching on steroids, because like it literally is drinking from a fire hose when you start reading that information. And the whole notion is, you know, we're not going to try to boil the ocean, but the notion is, now that I know this about myself, now that I have this awareness, what is most important to change such that I can drive, you know, what is my mindset and my belief system that I have to look into such that there's a behavioral output.
Change, yeah. Awesome.
That often kicks it off. And we have that 360 tool is offered both at an individual level and at a team level. So that also drives great insight.
Awesome. That's
another
great.
thing that I love, I'll just tell you one more, which actually follows really closely, immunity change, one of my favorite tools. And that really drives deep work. So those are, I don't know, Vicky, if that answered your question, but, you know.
It's a great start. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Rachel. Melissa asked, how do coaches integrate their communication with the OCM team? And how do they do it in a timely and relevant manner? So Melissa, maybe Lisa, I don't know. Do you want to?
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely jump in. So I think, I don't know, Melissa, when you talk about communication, what specifically you're getting at, but for me, in terms of my experience in that partnership, is that, you know, if you're blessed to have had that partnership from the beginning, you were really co-creating and co-designing the things that need to happen along the way from an engagement and a communications perspective. And so whether or not that is something that would be more specific to coaching or change, it comes together, and I look at it from an engagement lens, because I'm ultimately trying to move the individuals in an organization through a change journey. And that those things need to come together, so that also the experience from the employer, the leader's perspective, is that it all feels like it's connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I could just expand on that, Lisa, in another engagement that we're working on, we're actually side by side, and you know, it really has to be seamless. So in the lens of EY, like EY is EY, whether you're change or training or OD or a coach, we still have to appear to be seamless, so that we could carry that. There has to be a fluency of language, a fluency of thought and approach, so that, you know, as a coach, I can take some of that change work and understand that change work. So what are important flex points? What's important? What is happening? And understand that and bring that into the coaching. Similarly, major themes from coaching gets brought right back up to the change management team. So it really, specifically when you're in an organization that has the wealth of having both teams integrated within, again, better together. Like it's such a perfect theme. It's such a perfect, like, it's just two little words, but really we have to always appear as one. So I work quite closely on one of my projects. I work quite closely with the change people, because we have to deliver it as it has to look seamless.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we want to get to breakouts. So sorry, everyone, we don't get to all of your questions. Ask them in the breakouts. Maybe you can share with each other some different ideas. Andy asked, how do you move coaching up earlier in the change management process? As we've, you know, from the task force have suggested, there's lots of opportunity there. Any thoughts or experiences on how to do that?
So there's a couple of points here. I think, so there was, not that many years ago, and I think maybe some change professionals would still say, oftentimes the change professional is still brought into the process fairly late. The scope of work is finalized, the budgets are finalized. And so I think where the opportunity exists is partly in building this education between the two teams, between the two disciplines. Because the change person is often there earlier, they need to understand the ROI and how that impacts the outcome and the adoption that they're working on for the program overall, that coaching will bring. Because they're often the one that needs to be the internal advocate with the sponsor to find funding for that. Mm-hmm. And so there's a need there for that change professional to really understand the value and to understand what the impact is going to be.
Yeah, it's awesome. Thank you for that, Lisa.
May I add another suggestion for that?
Sure.
Another idea that we are going to do in the City of Toronto is enabling supervisors in coaching skills. So supervisors and managers. So we, at the beginning of each project, we know we're gonna rely on supervisors for coaching a little bit. That's little C, and we start trying to providing them with a professional development program or any kind of enabling event to make sure they are ready when they need to do the actual coaching for the project.
Yeah, and I think that's great, Alan. I'm just going to add one point to that. That, as we had described, right, small C coaching is what we call that, is weaved throughout the process. And I would say, change managers that are more coach-like are very effective, and that is definitely an add. I think one of the watch-outs from the task force that I'm just going to leave with you that we're trying to explore is coaching has a code of ethics around it, which is confidentiality. So there is, when you wear two hats, it can become very tricky because of this code of ethics. And so that's one of the big things that globally that they're trying to sort through, right? Because you have to hold certain things in confidence. And so where you can share themes back to the OCM team, what you cannot share within the code of ethics is anything in particular, any specifics. And so that becomes just, a very delicate balance and something that we're just working through. So great questions. And I think small C coaching is absolutely important. And there's a watch out when you're trying to wear two hats. So, all right. Do we want to go to breakouts? Yeah,
it's now the time for engagement, guys, or networking, if you prefer networking in the breakout sessions. So you will be randomly assigned to a breakout room. The maximum in each room should be not more than 6 individuals. And just as a suggestion, you can chat about this question. How do we, by we are talking about change management and coaching professionals, how do we work better together? So we can chat about that, or you can use that breakout room for any kind of professional networking opportunity if you prefer that. Jeff, I would be grateful if you start the breakout room and assign attendees.
How much time do they have, Alan?
10 minutes. Max.
10 minutes, okay.
10 minutes.
10 minutes. Enjoy. Get to know one another. If everyone wants to share in the chat some of the ideas that came up, is there one person that would like to come off mute, and maybe just if you want to share an aha, an insight that you had in your group, if you could just take maybe a minute or so to share, we'd love to hear from you. And please share in the chat so we all can hear what happened. Tase any resistors. Okay, well, that's one approach.
We have Andrea.
Hi, hey everybody. We had really great conversation with change and coach people, and looking at it from a number of different perspectives. One is boundaries. Do we have a team coach? Do we have one-on-one coaches to keep the confidentiality of our personal boundary coaching? But when it comes to the actual coaching of data and information and the actual mechanics of the change, we have to decide, we can't hold things confidential when we're trying to get from A to the vision. And it also depends, some of the comments were about the scope of it. Is this, for example, a giant bank? Or is this a smaller organization? It depends on the nature and the culture of what we're coaching, and and also what the change is all about. So there's a lot, it's not one size fits all.
No, it's not. Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing. I know we would love to just keep chatting, but we do have to finish up at 6:30. So please share in the chat with each other, like what were some of the things that came up. There's a poll that we want to launch, Jeff, if you want to launch that. We would love to continue the conversation. So we want to hear from you. How would you like to have the next conversation? Is there a webinar with panel discussion like what we did today? Would you like to hear a lot more examples of what's happening with change management and coaching? Or would you like to have a webinar that introduces, tells a little bit more about what is coaching, what is change management? So Jeff, I'm not sure, are you launching a poll?
It seems that it doesn't think I'm logging in from my computer anymore.
Oh,
I don't know, Alan, if you have the capacity to launch it. I don't know why I lost it.
I'll try to find it.
Okay, you know what, just throw it in the chat if you'd like to, please just let us know. What would you, if we were going to do this again within the next 6 months, what do you have some excitement and energy around? As I said, a webinar or more of intro to coaching and an intro to change management, a peer networking event, something else come to mind? Please share it in the chat and we'll review the chat after the call. And your feedback, we'll take your feedback and we'll come back with another event to bring our two communities back together. It's been great energy on this one, so I look forward to the next one. So Alan, you want to take us home? Yeah,
why not?
Give us a wrap.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. It was our breakout room was fantastic, and thank you so much, lovely speakers and all the participants in this wonderful evening. So this is the end of our session today. Thanks again for your engagement. And as Alicia mentioned, we are trying to have another joint event soon, not later than 6 months. We'll try to have one within 6 months based on your feedback. Okay, have a good evening.
Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It was awesome to have you here. Let's keep the conversation going.
Sure.